So, Berto, emails from patrons. What do you say?
Let's do it.
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Hahn. I'm a therapist, and I'm also a professor.
My name is Humberto Castañeda, and I develop cranes to lift heavy elephants.
Listener Johanna from Oakland, she says, what is the psychology of using a joke in a defensive manner? Recently, my roommate Michael and I have been having communication problems. So Johanna lives with Michael and they have communication problems. Since I started living with Michael, he would make jokes. He would be like, there is no way you love Joey, my dead dog. So Joey is her dog that had died. There's no way you love Joey more than Winnie, which is his current dog. There's no way you love Joey more than you love Winnie. And another thing, apparently, that Michael said was, wow, you so dumb. And another thing, wow, you are getting fat. Going on with Johanna's email. Every time I confront him on the issue, he says that he is just making a joke and he doesn't really mean it. This made me wonder if joking can be used as a defense mechanism or can it be used as in a passive-aggressive manner? What would be the motive to use jokes in such a behavior? Berto, what do you think?
Wow. Okay. So this is not where I thought this was going, because at first I thought this was going to be more like, because I use humor to diffuse situations, famously so. And I also use humor in defensive ways. I definitely have used humor in passive-aggressive ways.
But you don't call people dumb or fat.
But that's what I was going to say. First of all, these don't sound funny at all, number one. Two, I wouldn't call it passive-aggressive. I would call it aggressive-aggressive.
Yeah.
Now, I do agree that there's obviously more layers here. It's quite possible that they feel terrible about themselves and are projecting and spewing horrible things. But basically, look, I have certainly been passive-aggressive in my life, and not necessarily with, quote, jokes, but passive-aggressive statements as a result of my own insecurities or not knowing how to communicate properly. And I have, previously said things that I would regret, that I would say, for example, I might have said things passive-aggressively like, are you sure, as an example, are you sure you should, are you sure you should eat that or something? I don't know if I literally said that, but that's kind of a passive-aggressive way to say, I think you're eating too much, or I think you weigh too much, or something like that. That's not a joke. It's just shitty passive-aggressiveness. Mm-hmm. But in this case, I think what's happening is that, the person's confronting the other person and they're saying, oh, no, it was just a joke. That one is interesting because instead of owning up to the sentiment, they're saying, oh, no, it's just a joke. But the follow-up is well, what's the joke? And whether it's supposed to be a joke or not, that hurts me. Mm-hmm. And so if I were doing this either as the receiver or the giver, if I'm thinking about times where I've told a joke that was mean, I don't think of any specifics, but I'm sure I've done it.
I don't know. I mean, that's not your style.
But if someone confronted me wait, why did you say that? I certainly don't think I would say, oh, it was just a joke. I think I'd be a little taken aback maybe by, but I don't know. It's just...
You don't really do that sort of thing.
I don't do that kind
Neither
of
thing. Of us do. Well, so here's my thought about that first statement that she says, that apparently he said, there's no way you love your dog that died more than you love my dog. And apparently he says it in a joking way, or he claims it's joking. I have to imagine that at least it has the cadence of a joke. And who knows, Johanna? I don't know. But it's possible that when you're living together, it's the two of you, and there's a dog in the house, and it's his dog. It's possible that he might... Michael, the human, might worry that you don't like his dog very much, or that you don't like him very much. And instead of saying that directly or trying to improve the relationship, he is hurt by it, and then all that gets through some flow chart in his head that leads to a behavior, which is a dig at you liking your dog. But what he's hoping you will say is, haha, no, but I love your dog.
Right.
Or, oh, no, I love living with you. Or, some people will use quote unquote jokes as a way of bidding for love and attention. All of us, or a lot of us, do that. But if you're particularly insecure and maybe particularly hurt and angry, then the sort of things that'll come out of your mouth might be, pretty awful. I'm just trying to think, like, in a typical couple. I'm trying to think with my wife. Well, like in the morning, we have a routine where we kiss each other in the morning, and if we wake up and it's like an hour later, and one of us realizes that the other one, that we haven't kissed each other in the morning, we will make a little bit of a joke, like, well, I guess you don't want to kiss me today, or, well, I guess I'm pretty gross, you don't want to kiss me, or something like that. Yeah. And it's delivered in a way that's clear. If Stacy said that to me, I would know immediately that she's not actually being mean or a dick, that she is making a joke that's a bid for me to kiss her, or vice versa. So, all of us do those kind of jokes to mask a little bit of insecurity, or to make it a little lighter than to be, hey, you did not kiss me today. It's more indirect and playful. But you can imagine having that modeled to you and taking it way too far. He could be playfully trying to bid for you to like his dog. You know what I mean? Who knows?
So I used to have this situation with my wife where we would be at parties, and she would gang up on me jokingly. Yeah. But it was so much that I
was
eventually
that before I met you? Because she is an adamant supporter of you.
This was before we met.
I noticed that early on when I met the two of you, that she will never talk shit about you. I mean, she might be kind of playful, kind of.
No. This is
about things that are not below the belt.
This was before we met, before you and I met. And in my interpretation, who knows if I'm right, I think she was probably feeling like when it was just the two of us, I would dominate the topic or the conclusion of anything. And she also had a resentment towards me on a lot of fronts, some right, some not, whatever. But then in a party setting or social setting,
she had power.
She had power because, as you know, A, I am very self-deprecating. B, some people take advantage of that and like pile on. And then so she would join the parade, and then she was in a position of power in the situation, because if she says something, everyone around would like, oh, well, And so, but this would happen a lot, and I would be like, ha. But eventually it got to be so much that I actually talked to her. And luckily, I don't know why, but I was able to actually like tell her what I felt about it instead of like lashing out and like tangentially doing it. And I literally told her, like it actually hurts me when we're in those social situations. And I don't know why you do that, because it feels like you're trying to hurt me.
Well, did it lead to a conversation about you dominating conversations at home?
No. And sadly, at that time, probably neither of us were as self-aware, or we weren't that advanced maybe. But at least it was a healthy conversation, and it actually did lead to that behavior changing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very frequent thing that happens between maybe friends, but particularly spousal relationships, where that exact thing will happen, whether it'll be because of the you person dominating, or the other person, the person in your wife's position, just not being assertive, you know, like in another couple, the person in your position would be completely open to talking about things, but the other person, for trauma reasons, has a really hard time asserting or bringing things up. And so they suppress. But when they're around other people, they have a little bit more liveliness in their step, and will come out swinging and will say things to their spouse that their spouse has never heard before. And all of a sudden they're hearing it in front of 10 people. And you don't know what to do. You know what I mean? So it could be, but that's more a different dynamic than just using humor,
When I was young and I was in junior high in Colombia, me and my friends had very unhealthy humor towards each other because we would insult each other horribly. And it was
like, what would you say?
Well, each person there was a hot button for each person. And unfortunately, what happened is that...
Like I'm just trying to... Like, how low was the... Because me and my friends did that too. Like, in college, we had a group of friends, and one of my friends, we had gone out to the clubs, and he had gotten really drunk, and he had gone home with this woman from the club that he just met, that the next day he very much regretted having done that. And so there were certain elements of that story that we would pick on him for years and years later, you know. But it wasn't really below the belt because he would laugh about it too, you know.
Well, the problem I think in this case is that the things we were teasing each other about actually weren't initiated by us. Other kids in the class would have at some point teased any one of us about that thing. But then for some weird reason, even though we were friends, instead of us kind of like uniting and being like, well, F you, like, shut up, we would start teasing each other about the same things.
Was your friend group being teased a lot by other kids?
Not our friend group. Individuals, every individual in the class except probably a couple that were like that. There was this one guy that was 2 years older than everyone and 2 heads taller than everyone. So I don't think anyone teased him. But almost everyone at some point was teased about something by someone. But you would think, like, if you're tight, close friends, you would think, well, if some jerk is saying something.
So why did you do that?
I have no idea. But we would tease each other about those things and make it a running joke for the entirety of our relationship until we became adults and stopped doing it. And it's weird. Like, it was so mean.
So you could see Johanna's roommate, Michael, perhaps, you know, one of the many hypotheses, coming from a friend group that's like that and is just accustomed to that kind of ribbing of each other.
Like, I mean, I can certainly say in my case, part of it must have been defensive, obviously, because, that they made fun of me. Well, shit, I need to have something on everyone. Well, yeah, that's a good one. I'll make fun of them because of that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think this applies to what the listener is talking about, but I noticed this when I was young, that there's always someone that is being made fun of more than other people,
right,
in a friend group or even just a random group of guys that are, or people that are put together. And you really don't want to be that person.
No. So you need to, like, play defense.
Right. But if you play defense too much, you will definitely become that person.
Sure.
Because there are inviting elements or attractive elements of being a defensive person or someone who's really trying hard to stay out of that role that will make you an easy target. So it's a very careful dance. And I remember when I was like 12, I remember there was this system that I wasn't super successful. I mean, I benefited from growing up with the same group of people since I was in preschool all the way through high school and some through college, such that I was connected to a lot of people and was friends and friendly with a lot of people. So I was very rarely ostracized that way. But there was this one moment that I can distinctly remember where I was spending a night at a friend's house. We would have been 12 years old, I think, 13. And my whole neighborhood community was all white people. And since I was not completely white, that was a pretty big highlight of my identity in this community. And it was late at night. It was probably like 3 a.m. and we're all kind of giggling and stuff. And one of my very close friends sang, like the quintessential stereotypical song, bit that signals that someone's Asian, or Japanese.
Yep.
And someone giggled, and then another person did it, and then another, and then it became this running joke that night, and kind of over time. And in the beginning, I was like, oh yeah, that's just funny. It's just normal, back and forth. But by 4 a.m, I was, more jokes were coming my way. It was just this excuse to be racist against me or something. And I did not like it. And I remember having this feeling of like, but you guys are my best friends. What's happening?
What's happening?
Like, I'm not a random dude. Like, what, you know? And I remember noticing that in other contexts. It's like, oh, that guy is the scapegoat.
Let's do it. Yeah.
And how do I avoid having it shift to me?
I guess you were actually hitting on it, because I think that's what it was. Is okay. So there was this one kid in the class that was the best at coming up with things to tease other people about. Ironically, he was not a good student. He was not good looking. I don't think he was even that good at sports or anything. But his one skill was he could find the weakness and whisper to whoever was listening, like, "Oh, such and such." Blah.
Do you know what he did for a living? Because he could have become a comic.
I don't know.
Or something.
Maybe. I mean, he would appear to be your friend, but then behind your back, he would go and say something. I was never friends with him, but he would appear to be like, anyways. So that was one of the main people that would label things, right? But then I think what would happen is we would probably be like, okay, well, I can't become what you're saying, like the scapegoat. So I need to have little things at the ready. And I was never that creative to insult people. And I think neither of us were. So we would always use whatever was, okay, that works. Okay, that's the one I'm using. Yeah. And it's horrible.
Well, fast forward to high school when you're being made fun of for being Colombian all the time.
Right.
And then after that, it would make sense that in that context that you're talking about in Colombia, where you had a very vicious group of kids in your class, that's maybe when you learned how to be self-deprecating as a defense against the people that might make fun of you.
That's a good point. And actually, high school, now that I think about it, pretty horrible cross-racism too. Like, I mean, we didn't mean it, quote unquote, but because I was being teased by my Asian friends about being a Mexican, as they would put it, I would tease them about any number of Asian things. One night, me and these two of the Asian, not the ones you know, but these other two, I was in between them two, and it was a late night because we were working on a project. And the two of them were just going to town with all the Latin jokes. And I was fending one off and insulting the other, but it's impossible. It's like 2-on-1. I can't. And like you're saying, at first it was all fun and games, but it went on for like an hour or more.
Yeah.
And I eventually was like, I don't like this.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's obvious that another reason why this phenomenon happens is because of systemic racism and the system of racism, but also that when you're insecure, and young people are particularly insecure, that you look for ways to temporarily feel not insecure, or at least not as bad as other people. And if you put other people down, then you elevate yourself a little bit.
I gotta tell you, that is another key insight, because there are some friends of mine that we never did that with each other, even back in Colombia. So I was talking about my group of friends. Well, the one you met, Juan Miguel, him and I never actually did that. And I don't think he did it as much. Well, he might have done it with some of the others, but him and I didn't.
Why?
Well,
are you saying that you had security
and between the two of us, I guess?
Yeah.
That is a good question. I don't know. But I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's a fascinating question. First of all, there were few things for me to make fun of him about.
Did he come from a good family?
No, not particular. But there were a few things for me to make fun of him about. Like, his last name is Grillo, means grasshopper. So, you know, I could make sort of fun of that, but like not really something to hang on to. And he chose not to make fun of me. I mean, he would make fun of me more in the more casual ways. Like, we're playing basketball and I shoot and I miss. It was like, whoa, what's wrong? You didn't wake up this on the right side of the bed. Whatever, right? Like, teasing each other about momentary non-racial or personal trait things. Have at it. Lovely. Awesome. But the thing was, I don't know why. And then here in the States, someone like Ty and I never did that, ever. I mean, okay, maybe like trivially, but not really.
Thinking of those Asians and half Asians that you were friends with in Tacoma, Ty comes across as perhaps by a long shot the most secure of all those guys.
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
By a long shot.
By a long shot. Yeah. Right. And so I think, that's a really interesting insight, because left in my own by my own devices, I'm actually fairly secure. But then if you drop me in the wrong context, I start feeling all sorts of insecure, and then I'm going to lash out in those unhealthy ways. But when you put me in the petri dish with the more secure people, then I'm fine, and they're fine, and we're fine.
I hesitate to say this, but there are times when I notice that I have kind of a skill of doing what you're talking about, where I can make fun of people in public and get everyone to. In fact, when we were playing poker the other night with your brother, I did it to your brother. I made fun of him. So I'm there with all of his friends. Your brother's friends are playing poker,
right?
And then all of his friends,
right.
But I've never met these guys, so I'm kind of insecure. I mean, not terribly, but it's been a while since I've been in a group of people where I'm like the outsider. Do you know what I mean? I'm the one who is very much, everyone else is talking about old stories and they know each other.
And you're the new guy. Yeah.
And I'm the new guy. And you and your brother are talking with all those guys. And so, and I was fine. I'm old enough now that doesn't really get under my skin like it would have when I was younger. But even with my friends that I know well, I'll find sometimes that I'll get somebody and everyone will laugh and I'll regret it. I'll be like, dude, Kirk, like, calm down. Like, you don't have to go after. I'm not. If I was cool, no one would laugh. You know what I mean?
But you go to a certain edge there. And,
and I noticed that like a long time.
You've never done that with me, have you? I don't think so.
No. I mean, I don't do it very often is the thing.
Yeah.
And if I did do it with you, I would do it in a way that you would be completely fine with and would laugh too. You know what I mean? Like, because you don't take things personally in that way.
What is that supposed to mean?
And your brother is in your direction. He's not as much as you, but he's also very self-deprecating. And
the thing with my bro is actually he does get a lot of shit from a lot of his friends, but I think they pick on things that are not like character flaws.
No.
They're all like, dude, in your late 20s, you were a mess. You were totally like late for everything or something like that.
Well, it'll be some joke about, I don't know. Anyway, point is I've never...
Or like Seth will tease him about like, you have terrible taste in horror movies or whatever,
Right. I've never... Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. In fact, we might have done that night because Seth and I were bonding over our very similar tastes in music or in movies. And
I can't believe you found one in Rainbow's fan in there.
Yeah.
That was actually pretty funny because the one actually avowed critic of movies and music happened to be in your corner on that one.
Well, we were in alignment through a lot of conversations, but I've met a lot of people who say In Rainbows is their favorite Radiohead album, by the way.
That's fine. I know a lot of fans of Kid Rock.
Oh, boy. I mean, you realize... that In Rainbows is their least accessible, but perhaps most artistic of all the albums.
Art is...
It'd be like criticizing Sgt. Pepper or something. I like original Beatles.
No, but it could be okay. But it could be like saying, look, I hate to say this, but it could be like saying, look, the White Album could have been a single album, right? They could have cut.
But there's some great tracks on the White Album.
There are amazing tracks on the White Album.
But you disavow the entire album.
I don't... Look, my honest take about it is this. Every time I have heard it, and like I said, in 2000, whatever it came out, I had it on constant replay, like constant. I am always floored by their musicality, their talent, his voice, everything. I just have always gravitated to catchier singing lyrics.
Sure. And this album has very little of that.
And so why this weekend I listened to all of the Innocents Erasure back to back because there's only one bad track on that album. This one stupid 65,000 track that's got like the beat. The beat. I don't even know what the hell they were doing. It's like the stupidest thing. But every other song on there is amazing.
Is that early Erasure, that song? Because
they were Innocents were like 88 maybe.
Oh, well.
It's not early Erasure. It's just, they just threw in some wacky thing in there.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's take a break. And when we get back, more of your emails. What do you say, Berto?
Let's do it.
All right, we're back from the break. Let's do an OPP, Berto. What do you say?
OPP.
These people became patrons all the way back in 2021. These folks are all monthly patrons. We have Bina from Broomfield, Colorado.
Oh.
Deborah from Caernarfon from Great Britain. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. Lamaris from Chappaqua, New York. Chappaqua. Chris from Chicago. No, actually, all these are middle tier patrons. I'm sorry. Middle tier patron Bina, middle tier patron Deborah, middle tier patron Lamaris, middle tier patron Chris, middle tier patron Jack from Decatur, Alabama, middle tier patron Sika from Denver, Colorado, middle tier patron Alice from Newton, Iowa, and middle tier patron Kate from Towson, Maryland. And then the following folks are all annual regular patrons. We have Zilgorb from Bolton, Ontario, Kaylee from Brownwood, Texas, Christina from Garden Grove, California, Damaris from CR, Berto, country code CR. Take some guesses. What do you think?
Croatia.
CR is South Korea.
What?
CR.
What?
Why? Why isn't it NK, right?
No,
or
SK.
Yeah. SK. Laura from Grand Marsh, Wisconsin. Tanya from Jamaica Plain, Massachusetts. Olga from Germany. The DE is the 2-letter word for Germany.
Deutschland.
Beata from Lithuania. I have a great grandmother named Beata.
Oh, I thought you were going to say from Lithuania.
From Sweden.
Okay.
Sarah from Germany. We have Nicole from Lease Summit, Missouri.
Ooh.
Tuna from Munich, Germany. A lot of German
Nice.
folks. Kim from Palo Alto, California. Lori from Plantation, Florida. That's an unfortunate name for a town. I live in the town of KKK, Alabama. And Ego Manulus from Potsdam, Germany. Wow, there's a lot of Germany, folks.
Wow.
Thank you for being a patron all the way out in Germany and everywhere else and staying a patron through thick and thin.
Amazing.
All right, this next email, anonymous listener, they say, how can one deal with micromanaging at work coming from the higher ups? So how would you define micromanaging, Berto?
Yeah, so micromanaging, hey, Kirk, I need you to grab all these guitars, tune them up, get them ready for the customer. You got that? Yes, Berto. Okay, cool. 5 minutes later, are you starting? Oh, you're getting, okay. 10 minutes later. Oh, I wouldn't start with that one. Probably start with the one on the other end. 15 minutes later. You're tuning them. I would tune them the lowest string first. And basically, at one point, they literally say, here, give me the guitar. They tune several of the guitars for you.
And you're just watching them.
And you're watching them. And they're actually not even teaching you because they actually like, here, I'll just do it. You go clean the bathroom for a second. Oh, but wait, tell me how you're cleaning the bathroom. And essentially, you feel completely disenfranchised, no power. The power's taken from you. They don't even attempt to like teach you so that next time they don't have to micromanage you. It's horrible, dude. When that happens, it's horrible.
If someone were to micromanage you at your current job, what would that look like?
Well, it happens all the time, sadly. But oddly, I'm the boss, so it's like it happens in reverse. But really what it is like, I'll be sitting there and I'm like, all right, I have a task, right? And I'm like, well, all right, well, let's just go ahead and do this. And
do what? Do what kind of things?
Lift heavy things with cranes. You know, it's like, what are we gonna do here? How are we gonna do this problem?
Yeah.
And then what happens is they start micromanaging me. Like, well, don't use that crane. And then some idiots like, why don't we use actual like mechanical cranes? I'm like, you're fired. And then they micromanage me in the firing. It's horrible.
So an anonymous listener says, aside from leaving the job, are there any ways to respectfully communicate that you recognize micromanaging and would like it to stop? Is the root cause the desire to control everything? Is it even possible to assert your ability to perform well without being micromanaged past a certain point of no return? Berto, what do you think?
Yeah, dude. Okay, so it really has happened to me that, and I've done it. Like it's happened both ways for real.
So, to answer anonymous listener's question, why were you micromanaging?
Right. Okay. So when I have micromanaged, first of all, I was an inexperienced manager. That's the first thing. I just didn't realize that I was micromanaging. Number two, I just didn't trust that the job would get done the way I wanted it done. Number three, I was insecure about what that would mean for me in my career.
Right.
Because basically, it's okay if I were like secure in my position. It's okay if there's some amount of failure, because that could be a learning moment. But if I feel like any failure could spell doom for me, I can't possibly afford to delegate anything.
Right.
And so those were definitely causes in my case.
Right. So anonymous listener, you ask, is the root cause the desire to control everything? The way I answer that pretty much in every context is we don't have a desire for control. People talk about it like that all the time. Like, I mean, unless you're a psychopath or something, which is a very rare individual, we don't have a need for control. We don't spring from the womb with a need for control. We have a need for safety.
Yeah.
Some people say, well, you have a need for power. No, we have a need for safety. We don't care about control or power if we're completely safe. You know, the reason why we exert power or concern ourselves with power or become obsessed with power and possibly with control, like in intimate partner violence relationships, domestic violence relationships, is because we do not feel safe. Now, it could be a distortion. In intimate partner violence relationships, it is a distortion, right? It's because of the trauma that the person went through growing up regarding attachments and other kinds of things that led to them having a chronic sense of feeling in danger, and thus they resort to some sort of defense, which could be control and abuse. But it's not a need for control or a need for power, it's a need for safety. And so for someone that's micromanaging in a way that is detrimental to those around them, it's because they don't feel safe. Now, you might have nothing to do with that. In all likelihood, you don't. Like what Berto was saying, his subordinates had nothing to do with Umberto's insecurity. There was some other reason for Umberto's insecurity. And you could argue that it's a top-down thing where your boss should have been making you feel more secure back then.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
That's quite possible. There are also cases where you screwed up hiring someone, and now instead of taking the hard step of like maybe letting that person go, or at least moving them to a different thing,
or training them more slowly,
or training them, imagine that.
Yeah.
The only option you think you have is to, fine, here, I'll do it.
Right. Or if you have trauma regarding letting other people doing things, like you had an alcoholic parent or a spouse that would screw things up or whatever, you know, there's a lot of roads. But what do you do if you're being micromanaged, Berto? How do you get out underneath that?
So I've been very direct and now I'm older, I've had several experiences. I've been very direct with managers that were doing that to me.
What'd you say?
I literally just in our one-on-one said, so here's the thing. So remember we had that presentation and you didn't like the way I was putting the slides together, and then you just said, I'll do it, and then you did it. Like, I don't learn anything from that. And it really feels like I'm not empowered in that moment. And, you know, the better managers, because everyone slips up, the better managers will go like, oh, you know, good point, or let me think about that or whatever. And then other times you might realize that you're not under a good manager, and then you got to maybe think about that, because sometimes it'll be like, well, that one was just too important, or, oh, I know, but just, you know, like excuse. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or even just telling you, listen, you keep making the same mistake. I'll remind you, blah, blah. Like, even that would be more direct. And then, you know, but usually that's not the way it goes. It's usually like an excuse or whatever. But the times that I've done that with a manager that's actually experienced, they, even as I'm saying it, they're like, oh, you're right. You know, like I can see the shame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. Some other strategies, these are all things that I've tried because I've been micromanaged before. It's been a while, but if I think back, and one style, which, you know, isn't as mature as Berto, is just to avoid the situation by not being around them very often. You know, if you're not
avoid them.
If you're not in their vicinity, then they can't micromanage you.
Yeah.
Another option is to over deliver for a while. This is more my style, is that if someone is micromanaging me, or more broadly, I get the sense that they don't feel secure in my abilities to be independent, then I will work 70 hours a week so that they will, there will be no doubt that I know what I'm doing and that I can do it well and that I will get the job done.
Yeah.
And I want to over deliver in that way, for not only the reason of getting someone to stop micromanaging me, but even if I've had bosses that weren't micromanaging me, but I don't like any managing.
Yeah.
Forget about micromanaging. I don't want even an ounce of managing. And so when I have had new jobs, I will always strategize that. I will always over deliver.
Right.
And then I will have established a reputation as someone who gets shit done.
Right.
Then the manager can spend their time paying attention to other people, and then I can actually pull back and kind of coast a little bit because my reputation, carries the day. Sure. And I work better when I'm not being managed at all, honestly.
Right.
I don't want people breathing down my neck.
Yeah.
So that's one thing.
There's different cultures too, meaning depending on the company, some cultures will make it even worse because that is the culture from the top down, where literally from the CEO or whatever, they are already micromanaging their VPs. The VPs are micromanaging the directors. And so then if you're caught in that system, it's actually really hard because it's cultural, it's organizational.
Right.
You might need to make a change if that's the case.
Well, another option in that situation is to just smile and internally judge them. Because, and I've been in these shoes when I was much younger, like high school, college, where you have no power and there's nothing you can do about it. And people think of you as you're just an idiot and there's nothing you can do to convince them otherwise. And so I remember just quietly letting things happen and internally just saying, this person is dumb, or whatever. And just letting it go. It's like, well, I'm getting paid the same by being micromanaged or not. I'll do my job. I get my paycheck. That's what I'm here to do. Another thing to do is to get out ahead of them. You can usually hear micromanaging as it's coming down the tracks, and you can head it off at the pass by saying, yep, totally. I thought of that. You can assert yourself and say, I know where you're headed with that. Thank you. And I thought of that. This is what it, you can kind of demonstrate that you know what you're doing. And maybe if you do that enough, they will go, oh, I guess I don't need to explain every little detail to them. Another thing is more what Berto was saying, is to tell them, but also to develop a strong relationship with them.
Yeah.
It's very important in my estimation, and it's underemphasized, I think, in our culture, that your work relationships, whether it's your boss or your subordinates or your coworkers, there are so many opportunities, as we all know, for emotional problems and conflict and misunderstanding and hurt and anger and resentment that is the same sort of emotions and things that happen in a family.
Yeah.
But in a family, we at least culturally understand that you're supposed to bond with your spouse and your kids and your parents, and you're supposed to be good friends. Mm-hmm. You're supposed to like each other. Yeah. But somehow at work, it's like, well, we're at work. It's the same thing. Arguably, in some contexts, you're closer to the people at work than you are the people that you live with at home.
You spend a lot of time with people at work.
Right. Yeah. So starting out, or at least retroactively starting to go on a campaign to develop a strong relationship with the key people that you work with, where you just hang out, where you like each other, you know each other, you find things in common, you bond in some way, you share things with each other, you self-disclose. so that when push comes to shove and there's the inevitable conflict, you have some foundation to rely on. Like for you, Berto, when you went to that manager and said, hey, that thing you did at the meeting, you know, it really stepped on my toes. If you have, I'm guessing, a better relationship with that person where you can joke around and like each other, you feel you feel much freer to say such a thing, and you're going to trust the person is going to give you the benefit of the doubt, and the manager is much more likely to regard what you're saying than if you barely know each other. Completely.
The one caveat I will give, just from personal experience, is when you are new to an environment, like you start in a new company or whatever, I've found through bad experience, like there's this one time I literally had this where I trusted too quickly someone I literally just met and disclosed way too much too soon over beers. And then they talked about that to other people behind my back.
At work?
Yeah.
What was, I mean, what
like we were, you know, after hours, we went for a beer and we were both kind of.
But what did you share with them that?
Well, we were complaining about things that we didn't like at the office.
Oh.
And I thought we were like kind of having a little bit of a bonding thing or whatever. No, that person went and talked to other people about what I had said. And it was, anyways, the point is,
dude,
I trusted this person too quickly.
Yeah.
And I disclosed too much too soon. Now, should that person have done that? No, of course not. I would never do that.
Yeah.
But I'm saying you don't know who you're interacting with at first. So I'm not saying don't do that. Just, you know, kind of play your cards a little wisely at first. Also, just another thing is when you're coming into a new environment.
Was there a consequence? Like,
yeah,
were you ostracized
100%.
because of that?
Oh, so this was brought up by one of the people in charge as a negative about me because, yeah, absolutely, there was a consequence. So I'm just saying, like, when you walk into a new environment, listen a lot first. Get to know people, but remember that you don't know these people yet. So don't, like, put all your eggs in one basket with someone that you don't know if they're trustworthy or not.
That happened to me in my senior year of high school playing football. We had a new coach, and he was supposed to be like God's gift to football because he took our team to state championship like 10 years earlier or something. And I was really looking forward to having him as our coach. And very quickly, I realized that he didn't know what he was doing. For those people who know, I'll just explain it. It won't be that hard to explain to people who don't play football. But so there's this particular play called an option play. And if you know where the quarterback is, right? Essentially, it's a play that can be any one of three different things.
Okay.
So you can hand the ball off. You can not hand the ball off, but you fake the handoff, and the quarterback runs around the end. Or you fake the handoff, you run around the end, and you pitch it while you're on the sideline.
And is this agreed upon ahead of time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like everyone knows this is going to happen. You know if it's right or left.
Yeah.
And it's all dependent on the quarterback's decision. Like the quarterback can decide based on what the defense is doing.
Right.
Do I hand the ball off?
So the motions are going to be the same, but the delta is going to come from the quarterback about what they do. Okay.
Right. Like if you're the pitch man, you always run as if you're going to get the
run
pitch,
anyways,
but you might not get the pitch. If you're the dive, you know, the up the middle running back, you run up and you don't know if he's going to give you the ball. And if it's in your stomach, then you run. If you don't, then you act like you got it. And anyway,
Got it.
So the normal way of defending against this play is that you assign a defensive player to each of the possible ball handlers.
Yeah, yeah.
So you put typically like a cornerback on the pitch man, you put maybe one of the linebackers, maybe an outside linebacker on the quarterback, and you put an inside linebacker on the dive man or the initial up the middle running back. And the way that it works is, say, so if I played middle linebacker, so if the running back comes up the gut, there's really no way to tell if he has the ball or not because there's so many bodies that are in the mix. You have the offensive lineman, the defensive lineman, and I'm right behind the defensive lineman. I can't tell who has the ball, at least for a second. You know, it takes a bit. And 1 second, then
everything.
I'm out of the play, you know, because everyone's still running. It's a very quick acting play. So what you're supposed to do when you're assigned the dive man is I just have to hit him. just take the thinking out of it.
Yeah, just hit him.
Hit him, and if he has the ball, take him down. If he doesn't, well, you did your job.
Yeah.
Other people have the other things. Okay.
Right.
So what this genius of a coach decided, and he was supposed to be a defensive genius, and he was supposed to be particularly a genius with linebackers, which I was very excited about. The linebacker is kind of like the quarterback of the defense, by the way. And I'm captain of the football team. I've been varsity for a number of years.
So you know what you're doing.
Yeah, and I've played against the option before because there are certain teams that just tend to run the option more, and so you tend to prepare. Anyway, so his genius approach was the middle linebacker, and we had 3 linebackers, so you had one linebacker, and I was that linebacker. I am in smack dab in the middle of the defense. I am responsible for the dive man, the quarterback, and the pitch man on both sides.
Oh my gosh.
There are 10 other defensive players, none of which have any assignments.
What?
Yeah. So
but I mean, is he doing that because like you're the better linebacker? No,
it's just his scheme. And looking back, honestly, he probably forgot or he was suffering from dementia. There is no coach on the planet
that would have done that.
I mean, just my explanation to you, it doesn't
I
make
immediately went like, that sounds like the obvious thing.
And I'm not even leaving anything out. It wasn't like I sort of had everyone. That was the assignment. And that's just one example of how what I thought to be how bad his coaching was.
Yeah.
And there were a number of other things. And so early on in the season, before the first game, I started talking shit about him to other players.
Yeah.
And, I was probably being arrogant because I feel like I'm hot shit because I'm captain of the football team. I'm a senior. He's kind of the new guy. He's the new coach. And I had all these high aspirations for him. I was a bit angry at him because the other thing is we would run in practice and I would miss my assignments because it was physically impossible to meet them. And I'd get bitched out and I started talking shit about him. And one of the players told him,
oh no.
And there was a sit down meeting with all, there's probably like 80 players, I don't know, 50 players in the stands. We all sit down and the coach has this long, just chewing out of the entire team.
Wait, how many players?
Like probably 50.
What?
Yeah.
For an 11, isn't it? How many people are on the
Well,
field?
you have 11 on offense, 11 on defense.
Oh, gosh, wow.
Maybe 40. I mean,
That's
it depends,
a lot of
depends
people.
on if you
so he's
involve
got
software.
all these people on the stands.
Yeah, so all of us players, and he's just, bitching us out, and but everyone knows that he's yelling at me. Because by then everyone knows.
Like he's like, it shows a lack of respect. People talking about blah blah.
And it's true. I mean, as the captain, I should have gone straight to him.
Of course.
But I was being a child, and
you trusted the wrong people.
and I trusted the wrong people, and he didn't start me in the first game. I remind you, we had 3 linebackers, which is kind of a weird defense. You can make it work, particularly in high school. And for those following along, that doesn't include the outside linebackers. There were 3 middle linebackers, and I had been varsity.
How many normally would there be?
2.
Okay.
Yeah. It's pretty weird to have 3. Anyway, point is there are 3 possible positions on the field that I can play since I've been starting for 2 years and I'm captain of the football team.
Yeah.
And he didn't start me in the first game. I wonder why.
Well, random coincidence. Just tried it. Strategery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But by that point, I was losing a lot of enthusiasm for the game and I didn't really care. But I was starting the rest of the season. Anyway, that's my long, dumb story about that. All right. Anonymous patron, she says, my very close friend has a friend who was driving drunk and killed a 19-year-old girl. Okay. So my very close friend, so anonymous patron, her very, very close friend has another friend who she knows, by the way, that was driving drunk and killed a 19-year-old girl. It was shocking, horrific, and heartbreaking. My friend, so not the one that drove drunk.
Yeah.
My friend feels like she is grieving the loss of her friend,
Yeah.
And I don't know how to help her, my friend. That wasn't the drunk driver. I have said to her, given that she's really distraught, I've been trying to help her. I have said that it's okay to have conflicting feelings and care about her friend while also believing that her friend should face justice.
Yeah.
But there's a general sense from my friend of numbness, confusion, and grief. I think it is hard for her to process her sadness and empathy for her friend, the drunk driver, without feeling immense guilt because of the victim and her family. It reminds me a little bit about the Ashton Kutcher, Mila Kunis, Danny Masterson situation that you briefly talked about. Do you know about that situation?
Yeah.
What do you know about that situation?
I know that, first of all, Ashton and Mila wrote support letters for Masterson, and that also there was.
Well, you have to start from the beginning. Danny Masterson.
Oh, I assumed. Yeah, Danny Masterson from that '70s show was accused and convicted of raping women. And but then, you know, because Ashton and Mila knew him personally and were very good close friends, they were asked to give support character. What is a character?
I think was it a sentencing letter?
Yeah, it was something like supporting him to reduce the sentence or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? Anyway, so they wrote their letters to and then people came out going like, "How could you support him?" etc. Then there were also some rumors, which who knows, total rumors, that Ashton might have felt like he had to because Danny Masterson might have known more about Ashton's involvement in Ashton's discovery of a girl he was dating who was murdered by a psychopath. Anyways, long story short, people got upset at Ashton and Mila because they wrote those support letters.
And then they released
a quote apology
video that really just points to the fact that just because you're an actor does not mean you know how to write or direct.
Yeah.
Because this video is one of the worst apology videos I've ever seen. I mean, it's so stilted.
Yeah.
You know, I just wish I were there with some of these folks and I could just sort of get them out of their head. Because if they just apologized from the heart, because in all likelihood, Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis have a heart. They have a relatable story to tell, but they always write this really like, it's like they thought about it too long, you know? And then they deliver it in this really disingenuous way. And so, yeah, that video is pretty bad. And so there's a lot of backlash on them. Because to me, I wouldn't be surprised if what was in their hearts was very similar to what Anonymous Patron is talking about, of like initially when Danny Masterson was accused, they were like, no way.
Right.
Danny Masterson he's one of the best. Apparently, Danny Masterson to Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis was one of the nicest, kindest people that they had ever met.
Yeah.
Which can be true, even though the internet doesn't believe that, you know. And so when they first hear the accusations, they're like, no way. And they might have even been hanging out with Danny and Danny would be like, no, that never happened, And then, you know, and famous people are probably pretty used to hearing these kinds of accusations occasionally, you know, that are false. Not those kind, but, you know, random rumors that people say. And you can imagine that Ashton and Mila are just like, 100% no way he did it. He even told us, you know, why that story is bogus. As the stories start to mount, and you can imagine if you're Ashton and Mila, you probably aren't super enthusiastic about following this story. You know, you're not, your Google alert isn't sending you news stories about more accusations. So you're probably not super in the loop, but the critical mass, eventually enough information comes out and you have to face the fact that, oh my God, did he do these things? And what, you know, in your heart, what do you do with that? That's a very confusing place to be. Then over time, you reckon with the fact that he did do these things, but you still love the man.
Yeah.
You might have some anger towards him and some sadness for the victims, and you still love the guy, and you believe that he probably needs to do time, but with treatment, maybe he can get better. And so you write a letter to the judge behind closed doors saying, hey, he did these things and that's bad. And there's another side to him that can be redeemed. There's a good side to him. And if you're Ashton and Mila, at the very least you think, well, I'm doing this for my friend. It probably won't do anything because, you know, it's not like a letter from Ash. It's not like the judge looks at that and goes like, well,
If Ashton says,
then Danny gets just 6 months of probation. Like,
but to be fair, it's not because it's Ashton and Mila. But the reason those things even exist is judges do, in fact, almost robotically take into account mitigating factors and then do things like, okay, well, it was supposed to be 12 years. I'm going to do 10 years plus whatever. Like, these things can happen. But it's not because it's Mila and Ashton. It's because it's a part of the process.
Right.
Yeah.
And there were, I'm sure victims were also, and families were writing
the opposite,
much more convincing letters. You know what I mean? So it's not like, I think the public thinks that Ashton and Mila pulled strings to get Danny off. It's like, that would never happen.
Right.
You know what I mean? But I get the backlash because their apology, it almost came across, it was too defensive is the thing. They were basically like, you know, we've given money to charities for victims. It's like,
that has nothing to do with
it. It's nothing to do with what you're being accused of. Like,
like, just use it in any other context. Like the extremes. By the way, pet peeve of mine. People really dislike when you use an extreme analogy, but they misunderstand why you're doing it. I'm doing it to show that there is a limit. And if there is a limit, then we have to discuss where that limit is, right? So in my case, like
a thought experiment.
Exactly. The example would be, imagine
they do this in philosophy all the time,
right? Imagine I go out and I kill 1,000 people tomorrow, right?
Well, let's not go that far.
Okay, 999, and then you're like, Berto, what are you doing? And I'm like, dude, I have donated a lot of money to charity.
Yeah.
I've like, what?
Yeah.
I mean, that's an extreme. So in this case, they think that you can't point a finger to me about not supporting victims. Look at all the shit I've done.
Yeah.
Like, okay. And so to your point, they unfortunately missed the mark on what they were supposed to.
Yeah, I mean, all they had to say was, I could see how this would look bad, and I've just been completely busted up about this whole thing.
Yeah.
Do I believe that Danny did these things? Yes, I've seen, and it's horrible what he did, and what he did to these people, to these victims. It's just horrible.
Yeah.
But I beseech you to be in my shoes for a second. This was my best friend, and you're just gonna have to take my word for it. There were no signs that he did those things, and he was a good guy, and he was good to me. You're just gonna have to believe me on that. He was the nicest guy, one of the nicest people I ever met. Maybe it was all an act. I don't know. So when I was asked by him to write a letter saying that I knew him to be a nice guy, I just felt like I should do it. But I get it. It could look like I'm not standing with the victims. I don't know what to do. I'm just one guy. I'm just trying to do I'm confused. Just say something like that.
Yeah. I would even keep it like fairly simple. Like, this is a horrible situation. There's no good sides to this. I'm very saddened by everything that's happened. It came to light that myself and my wife wrote a letter of support for our lifelong or whatever long friend, Danny. And I understand why people would find that upsetting. I understand why the victims and the victim's family would find that upsetting. Sadly, I don't know what to do. He was my very good friend, and that's what we did. End of story.
So let's listen to their apology video. It's only a minute long.
Yeah.
We are aware of the pain that has been caused by the character letters that we wrote on behalf of Danny Masterson.
Okay.
We support victims. We have done this historically through our work and will continue to do so in the future.
Again, the delivery is so scripted and poorly delivered,
Totally. Now, I will say the first sentence is fine. Like, they're like, all right, we are aware that there's been pain. Okay.
But
great.
If I were there, I'd be like, don't just say you're aware.
Yeah, sure.
Like, say you understand why people are upset.
Yeah.
You understand why it would look bad.
And like you're saying, the delivery is like, we are aware that there's...
And then the second statement
is the defensiveness.
Is the defensiveness. Yeah. Okay.
A couple months ago, Danny's family reached out to us, and they asked us to write character letters to represent the person that we knew for 25 years so that the judge could take that into full consideration relative to the sentencing.
The letters were not written to question the legitimacy of the judicial system or the validity of the jury's ruling.
They were intended...
So, not a bad thing to say,
right?
But most people have already X'd out of this thing. You know what I mean? You got to get them in the beginning.
Well,
That's what I would have said to them. You got to lead with, we totally understand why people are angry at us.
Yeah, that's the case. Like, acknowledge what's happening. Acknowledge that it would be incredibly hurtful, that the whole thing is horrible.
Yeah.
And then kind of the statement he just made is kind of all you needed, which is, we were asked to write for our friend for 25 years, and that's what we did.
Well, I feel like more, given today's context, because people would say, how could you possibly consider him to be even a friend?
Yeah, but you're not going to be able to... I don't think you're going to be able to talk your way out of that one.
You know, you're probably right.
Yeah.
And experts, and I've heard PR experts basically say that, like, you want to say as little as possible.
Yeah.
I could never do that. If I had to do one of these videos, it would be 5 hours long because I would just say, you know, well, I guess I kind of did something like this, like during the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. I did have not an apology episode, but I read people's emails, and although most were positive or neutral, there were a couple that were hurt and angry at me, and I did respond to those, but I responded from the heart. And I believe that if I tell people, and this doesn't always work in real life, but I think it works more often than an alternative to this, that if I just walk people through my heart and my thinking process, I think it gives people a better chance to at least understand where I'm coming from. You know, because, you know, like when I was role playing their apology, I think it'd be important to communicate just how confusing it would be, you know, that Ashton and Mila didn't wake up and go, ha, 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 we're going to ignore victims and we're going to write a letter. Like it was done with a lot of consternation and difficulty and confusion and pain and care for the victims, you know, like the 3 upgrades so far from what we listened, the 3 upgrades that I think would have suffice for me anyways, were, number 1, like you said, in terms of delivery, show a little more like warmth, I guess. Yeah.
Number 2,
and humanness.
Right. Number 2, no defensiveness. Like we don't need to know your acumen with, you know, victims. That's
because it's irrelevant.
Number 3, we also don't need to know the things you weren't trying to do. That's okay. There's a long list of things you weren't trying to do. And I don't need it.
What's that?
Like, because she started saying, we weren't trying to subvert the justice system. We weren't. I'm like, that's okay. I think what we needed was basically the statement of acknowledgement. Like you said, like, I can totally understand how this has hurt people. Number 2, the thing that you did, which was, we were asked, but blah, 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 friend, 25 years. And we did that. And it's a very hard thing to do. I can understand why people may not understand it, but put yourself in our shoes. Blah, blah. And then, like, I understand you want to go on. In my case, I'd be like, that's it. That's the message. And then people will still hate, but at least you can't say that, like, well, they were being defensive or they didn't care or whatever.
For the judge to read and not to undermine the testimony of the victims or reach homicides them in any way.
Sorry.
But see, again,
I have to rewind it. Let's hear the full statement.
Yeah.
Of the jury's ruling.
They were intended for the judge to read. And not to undermine the testimony of the victims or reach homicides them in any way. We would never want to do that.
Yeah, but see, that's the kind of stuff that I find unhelpful, which is, you know, if I break your guitar, like right now, I'm like, spam, okay.
Spam?
Like, yeah, spam. Like Batman style, spam. And you're like, Berto, what the hell? Like, there's a lot of bad things I've done today. I've killed 999 people. I broke your guitar. And I start saying, like,
that far.
And I start saying, look, I am sorry, listen. I wasn't trying to make a political statement here. I wasn't trying to, like, get shards in your wall. I wasn't trying to accidentally also break your
Yeah.
Why are you saying all this?
Yeah.
Just apologize.
Right.
Just apologize.
Yeah.
And we're sorry if that has taken place.
Our heart goes out to every single person who's ever been a victim of sexual assault, sexual abuse, or rape.
I think what they might have been told, or maybe they decided, was like, don't edit it, don't produce it. The more candid, the better. And there's an angle there, I guess. But look, it sucks. Like, the whole thing has to be mindful of the message and the style, because that is what they're trying to do. They're trying to do damage control. Like they're not doing this. This doesn't actually help the victims in any significant way. It's damage control. So if you're trying to do damage control, this comes off as cold and unfeeling to a lot of people. So yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, I feel terrible for that whole situation as well, because like, well, as far as I know anyways, like the two of them didn't really have anything to do with the actual horrible acts that their ex-friend did, or a friend, whatever. I understand they got caught up in this, and I understand why I would write a letter for, in many cases, for a friend. I don't know if I would have in this. I don't know. You know, it's hard to know.
Yeah, that is a good question. But we've never been in those shoes.
But it's still a hard situation,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Like now, the writer of the question for us about the drunk driving, there is a categorical difference in my mind, which is that as irresponsible and horrible and life-altering as that is, and as much as people absolutely need to pay the price, I still think there's a difference between that and knowingly raping people. Mm-hmm. Right? Like you say, well, but they knowingly drove drunk. Yeah, absolutely. That's why they need to pay the price. But if we're like, there are categories to crimes. And if I were categorizing, I think like, yes. And that is manslaughter. And in my mind, I realize no one has to adhere to my rules. But in my mind, when you actually explicitly go and rape multiple people, you are transgressing even more knowingly or whatever. So if I were having to write a letter, I would sooner write the letter in support of a friend who killed someone out of a drunk driving accident than for a friend who raped two women. Mm-hmm. Again, it's horrible, and I would never hope to be in this situation. But I'm just thinking through, like,
well, I guess it kind of depends on the circumstance, right? Because if the friend of a friend was a typical person who drinks occasionally and doesn't usually drive drunk, or never drives drunk, and something happened and it was a freak accident.
You're right. That is context that's critical.
If the friend of a friend had been driving drunk repeatedly,
and they keep doing this, and they've had totally. No, that's a great point. The context is everything, because again, in the case with the person that raped two women, what if I don't actually believe that ever happened? I think they're wrong to be incarcerated. I could be right or wrong, but if that's how I feel, then yeah, I probably will write the letter. Mm-hmm. So context is everything. In either case, these are horrible situations to come up.
Yeah.
But so I do feel bad. I feel bad that their apology video was poorly done and wasn't well received.
Yeah.
I feel bad they had to make an apology video, but
yeah. So my question, how do you come to terms with someone you care and love doing a horrible thing? Is it okay to reach out to the woman who drove drunk and remain a friend with her? What can I tell my friend to help her? Well, the problem here is that people if everyone was left to their own devices, if your friend was able to just act from her heart and her own mind, and maybe from people, closely around her, then in all likelihood, things would progress normally. There would be difficulties, but it probably would work itself out. The problem is we live in a society today, and maybe we always did, I don't know, where there's such a black and white way of looking at things, where you could be literally fired from your job because you continue to have somewhat of a relationship with someone who drove drunk and killed someone, or you could be canceled from your friend group, or you could be, I don't know, cyberbullied online, by a whole mob of people. And so it complicates things, and that way of thinking has kind of gotten under our skin and made it so that I think a lot of our morals or judgment considers the mob online to be valid, to the point where the mob is now in our head, where we end up pre-canceling ourselves in a way. Like, it's a very nuanced situation.
Yeah.
You have a friend, let me just put you, Berto.
Yeah.
You drive drunk one night, and you haven't driven drunk, or you don't drink much anymore. So,
no, but I used to drive drunk, and I could have easily have killed someone.
Yeah, but my point is you haven't done that in a long time, many years. So point is that just that context. and you have a freak thing, maybe someone in your life maybe one of your parents dies or something, you have a really bad night and you make a bad judgment call, you get in a drunk driving accident and you kill a 19-year-old.
Yep.
I would have very complicated fucking feelings about that. But I guarantee you I would not divorce you as a friend because you're my friend.
Yeah.
And I would be devastated. It would alter my view of you. Yeah. It would affect my relationship with you for a great deal of time. But I wouldn't just go like, well, he's dead to me. Yeah. And if anyone asks me, I will say he is a drunken, criminal, psychopathic, narcissistic. I mean, that's what the internet wants me to do to you.
Right. And again, there's this categorical difference. Like, what if in this scenario, everything's the same up to the point you said it. But the thing I do is I still get drunk, but I don't drive and kill someone. I go downtown and I knife murder someone.
Were you drunk in this scenario?
Sure. And same thing. A terrible thing happened. I got drunk, but I didn't drive drunk and killed someone, presumably on accident. I went downtown Seattle and I murdered someone with a knife.
Well, knowing what I know about you, I would strongly suspect that alcohol was the main factor in you committing that murder. So you have to take away the alcohol.
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, I get what you're trying to.
I'm just trying to say that
between volition
like
or not.
Even in what you're bringing up.
But okay, let's go with that. Yeah. Let's say that I conclude that you were drunk, but not, to get in a drunk driving accident, you don't have to be that drunk. No. So let's say.
No, that's the thing.
So maybe you're just mildly drunk and you go downtown and you knife someone, you kill them. What then? Well, I guess it would depend on what you said about it and what I was convinced about. If you were just like, well, he looked at me funny, then maybe I would divorce you.
But that would have to change your perspective of who you thought I was.
Totally. And
right?
that's the point.
Like, is there ever a world, a universe in which you would imagine Berto would have done that, right? Like,
yeah.
So therefore,
whereas if you said something like, I don't know what happened to me, something that was, you as my friend, I am a friend of yours and I considered you to be your friend. And I guess I never really thought about this, but it's based on an assumption of my evaluation of your overall character.
Like, you wouldn't have ever been puzzled by how the Umberto you knew, let's rewind the clock 15 years. Let's say I go get very drunk downtown and there was no Uber back then. So I stupidly get in my car and drive. I'm not that drunk, but I'm drunk. I would definitely fail a test. I'm driving. I look away for a second and boom, I hit someone and they're older, whatever, they die. I don't think you would be like, that's not the Umberto I knew. Like, no, the Umberto I knew used to drink downtown and sometimes would stupidly drive like a lot of fucking people. And this is horrible and tragic. And I don't know if I can talk to him right now, but it's certainly not going to be like, but that's not the Umberto I knew. Whereas I go downtown, I murder someone with a knife. That's like, okay, I don't know what universe I've been living in.
Well, and we don't have to go very far to actually identify some things that you actually did that aren't as bad as that, but were bad that I had to struggle with. You would, we talked about this in the last episode, or one of the last episodes, where years ago you would act out your sexual abuse trauma with women, and it wasn't severe. It was mild, but noticeable and very concerning to me. And I had complicated feelings about that. But I suppose, because that was sort of in the beginning of our relationship, there probably was a bit of a question mark about who you were and thus my loyalty to you in those instances. But I did see the way you reacted afterwards. You would feel a lot of remorse. You would come clean immediately. You would go to the person and apologize meaningfully without any excuses. You would tell people close to you in your life, in your family, people that you didn't have to tell. You just be like, by the way, I got to confess this happened, And it didn't erase it, but it did show an overall, I guess what it is it's like, one, who do I want to be close to me? Do I want someone that is a wild card, meaning that They might knife someone randomly and not feel bad about it the next day. Or do I want someone that has occasional bad actions coming from trauma, but ultimately cares and apologizes?
Well, it's like with the drunk drive. Like if we stick with the driving thing, imagine my friends are saying, "Hey, don't do that. Like, here, I'll drive you, whatever." And I keep being like, "No, screw you. Like, who cares?" And I just keep doing it. Then I might even get like a couple DUIs. Maybe I've even been in jail, and I'm still like, fuck this. I don't care. And then I kill someone. That's a lot harder to come back from.
Yeah,
you know, like, because that's a pattern. That's a thing. Now, again, everything's horrible. Like anyone dying is like beyond horrible. So in this scenario, there's just no like happy story hiding.
But I don't even, even in that scenario that you said, where you have repeatedly rejected bids to cut back or not drive drunk, you're still not pulling a trigger. You're taking a risk. Obviously, people should not be driving drunk. It is considered immoral for a reason in our society because it is. But we all have to understand that there's nuance, and there's a lot of things that are happening in someone's heart. And like with you, Berto, if you had done that, if you had rejected attempts to stop drunk driving, you're like, screw it, I don't care, and then you get behind the wheel and you kill someone, I still don't know if I would just completely write you off. And
that's the complexity, is you don't know how you would react when someone you love does something horrible.
Yeah. And I would not be happy about it. No, and I would probably like target you with a bunch of micromanaging, if you will, and monitoring, and might even say, look, dude, if you even come close to doing this again, we're done. Yeah. Because I cannot stand by someone that continues to make those choices. But our friendship is so big and significant and meaningful and important to me that given your character, if you did that, I wouldn't just throw it away.
And again, it's the difference between, I don't know why I'm such a horrible person today, but tomorrow you read in the paper that they arrested a person here in the greater Seattle area. They found 100 bodies in his fridge. Turns out I was a serial killer this whole time.
Yeah.
I mean, when something like that is a realization, then you really realize, oh, okay, actually, it will devastate you for the rest of your life. But
I would break up. I'd break up with you because I'd feel like, why didn't you include
you in the slaughter?
Just joking. Yeah. In that example, one, that would completely alter
everything you ever thought you.
And make me wonder, like,
was I trying to kill you?
Could I have trusted anything?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. So the problem with that is essentially that we are not capable, we're not equipped with hard and fast rules for how to deal with these things. Because guess what? These extreme examples, there are human beings that have had to deal with those kinds of examples. Jeffrey Dahmer's parents or whoever's parents, right? Like literally deal with, like, that is my son, my daughter, my whatever. And it turns out that they've done some of the most incomprehensible things possible.
And by the way, this is why we have a legal justice system that doesn't incorporate family members' opinions.
That's right.
In criminal hearings. They'll hear it and consider it, but I'm pretty sure the trier of fact listens to the victims much more than family members that are standing by the perpetrator.
But what I'll say to the writer of the question is that, of course, it's natural to have conflicting feelings for everyone involved in this, and it would be it would be,
you'd be a psychopath,
impossible not to.
Yeah, you'd be a psychopath if you just wrote her off.
Right.
Like there's something wrong with you. Like that you're just like, oh, fuck her, my best friend killed someone. C'est la vie. Well, again, it depends on the context, right?
Yeah, but even then, like, you just can't micromanage people's emotions to that extent.
The fucking internet wants to. And I think that's the problem, is that if you, anonymous patron, if you, and particularly your friend, were to do anything other than completely reject publicly, because silence is violence, Berto, that if her friend doesn't on a daily basis, pronounce her rejection and her hatred for her friend that got in the drunk driving accident and unfortunately killed someone, then I would not be surprised if the internet and her close circle were to completely bully and reject and cancel her.
Yeah.
I don't know if that would happen in every context, but I would not be surprised. And you know, like with Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis, you know, well, let me ask you, Berto, given the little that we know, was it wrong for them to write the letter to the judge?
Wrong.
Immorally wrong.
Morally wrong. Not from what I know.
Yeah.
Not from what I know. I mean, because in the end, I'm not their relationship. I'm not them. I'm not even Danny. I wasn't in the room. Who am I to say any of this stuff?
Right.
The law took care of the things, right or wrong.
Yeah.
And they had a friendship, and they made a decision personally. Yeah.
Right.
Like,
and do we believe that Ashton and Mila, both of them, they don't care about victims of rape? Do we think that they're just like,
no,
yeah, whatever?
No, we do not believe that.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, like, again, you could set up these extreme cases, like the parent of the serial killer writes such a good letter that the serial killer is somehow released early for good behavior, which would never happen. But and then they go and kill more people. So then, can you hold the parents?
No, you can't. You got this. The system's fault. For being so stupid.
Yeah.
So if we don't believe that writing the letter was wrong, then the only thing we can really point to is just their ill-conceived apology video, which came across as being insufficient, stilted, and defensive.
But then we got to point our fingers to ourselves and be like, and I know I'm the first guilty part. Like, why do we have to be such critics of everything?
Yeah.
Why are we the Ratatouille character we like the least?
Now, having said all that, I know that there's another angle to the story that with Ashton Kutcher and other people on that 70s show and other men in Hollywood have been routinely harassing women in Hollywood and beyond. You know, there's a lot of stories of this sort of thing happening, particularly among younger men when they hang out in Hollywood, that kind of thing.
Really in any subculture.
Yeah.
Wall Street, the tech industry, whatever.
Yeah. Even underage girls. There's this one clip that I saw of Ashton Kutcher and someone else talking about one of their co-stars, I think, who had maybe just turned 18, and Ashton Kutcher was laughing. And it's just like, oh yeah, we used to talk about you. We'd be like, oh, wait till she's 18, which, you know, was something that people said back then that was completely acceptable, which is why Ashton Kutcher wasn't canceled back then.
Right.
But we now understand that there's rape culture, misogyny, sexism,
sexualizing of minors,
excusing, well, boys will be boys, or rapists, or she must have wanted it. You know, there's a whole system that props up perpetrators and denies victims. And that's a context that is definitely at play here. But we can't blame Ashton and Mila for that. You know, like they're not,
like, retroactively, right? Yeah,
right.
That's the other thing that drives me nuts. Like the last couple of days they were pulling out tweets from Taylor Swift's current boyfriend or something from who knows how long ago.
Travis Kelce.
Yeah, some football player.
Yes.
Or soccer. I don't know.
Football.
and then there was some tweets that were like somewhat offensive, you know?
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't remember what it was. And it's like, yeah, I guarantee you everyone would be canceled if we look at what everyone said even a decade ago, let alone 15, 20 years ago. Like, you know, everyone is canceled permanently if you rewind the clock a certain amount of time. Like, I don't know a single person in my life that didn't say things that were horrible back then.
Yeah.
Including myself, obviously.
Yeah, let's see what was it? Just gave a squirrel a piece of bread.
No, those are the cute ones. There's ones that came out like what was one was like something about women. Watching a fat person fall is hilarious because they like roll or something. Like there's something about fat people and stuff like that, which. Again, yeah, like don't say that, but like this is 15 years ago, whatever. I don't know how long ago it is.
Yeah. Now, can we say something about those old tweets? Sure. We could say, hey, that's dickish. Travis, what do you have to say?
And he'd probably say, yeah, that's why they're not up, because I was an young idiot, and I'm embarrassed of that.
Right. And maybe even more detail of like, well, I was a part of our culture that would shame that, and I have some inner shame about that kind of thing, and sometimes that would play itself out in the stuff that I would joke about. I mean, I said worse things than that tweet, honestly, when I think about it.
And I could show you movies from 5 years after that tweet that were still making fun of.
What?
You know, I could show you movies 5 years
that's
after
offensive. But that's defensive.
No, I know, but I'm saying no. I'm not saying that's what he should say.
Yeah, but I'm just saying.
I'm jumping out to the defense of everyone. What everyone said.
Well,
15 years ago.
Yeah, I think that it's a conversation, not a cancellation.
Yeah.
Put that on a T-shirt.
I love that. Yeah, and now I'm exaggerating slightly, because if 15 years ago the thing you said was, you know, we must exterminate blah people, then I don't care how much you've grown since then, like, you know, obviously.
But well, again, it would depend. Like, how old was someone?
Sure.
Where were they coming from?
Yeah.
Like for example,
my point is that it depends.
like, for example, in graduate school, I'm 24,
Yeah.
getting my master's, and I'm in a class, and we're supposed to be writing about race in America. And I don't remember what I was writing particularly, but I mentioned something about Farrakhan, and most of what I knew about Farrakhan came from one of my friends who knew a lot about politics and stuff. And I had, in this paper, been apparently passable to this teacher and had said things that were on the up and up, but this bit about Farrakhan was off the mark. And this is almost 30 years ago, and I remember this mark, and it wasn't even like you failed. It was just like this little note that said, handwritten in the margin in red pencil, of like something like, I don't think this is true, or something.
Right.
And, you know, this is pre-internet. So I'm just spouting stuff about Farrakhan that was, and I thought about it, and I was just like, where did I get that? I got that from one friend, a source that I trust, but he's just a guy my age. What the fuck does he know about anything?
Right.
But that's the way a lot of us are. We hear something from a credible source. We don't hear any opposition to it, and we just go, okay, that goes into my brain, and that's a thing now. Well, when it comes to culture and oppression and ideas about who it's okay to dehumanize, we have incorporated thousands of statements from thousands of people in movies. And for a young person to tweet things along those lines is expected. It'd be weird if they didn't. It's not okay. I think it's a conversation, not a cancellation.
I think there's some things that shouldn't have a statute of limitations. Other things should. For example, let's say Hitler had found the fountain of youth, and he was still around, and he'd actually totally reformed his way of thinking. He was giving money to charity. I don't care. Sorry. You lost that battle.
Well, yeah. A better example, because it's more tame, is, if you can believe that, is Harvey Weinstein, because he was a known philanthropist who fought a lot of good fights.
But he's never recounted. He's never recanted. He's never changed. He's never changed. He hasn't come 20 years later and be like, I realized I was a monster. I'm so sorry. I'm actually trying to make amends and things like that.
Yeah.
The scenario I was trying to give was, imagine a historical person.
If Harvey Weinstein did apologize and say, I'm so sorry for raping all those people, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like
there's no amount of goodwill, regardless of how awesome Harvey Weinstein was outside of the raping, that would make him uncancelable in my mind. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, you can't free him at this point.
Yeah, that's why I was saying Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah. And similarly with Hitler, it'd be like, no, we're still executing you. I'm sorry, sorry to the world. Great that you found that you were wrong, but
even that way of thinking, if we're drawing a line of conviction or something, like with this anonymous patron, the close friend to the drunk driver, who knows what her position is, but it's possible that she's like, my friend should do the time.
Sure.
At the same time, I love my friend and care about her and know that she's genuinely a good person, and I want to be there to support her. I'm not going to write a letter asking that the sentence be reduced necessarily, but I will collect calls while she's in prison, and I will talk to her, and I will support her, and if things go normally, I'll be a friend when she's released. anyway, now, can the friend say, you know what, I just don't know if I can stand by a friend who made a choice like that, even if it was just once. She knew that she was intoxicated. She got in that car and she took that risk. It wasn't, it's not a huge percentage chance of killing, but there's a chance. And even though I've never lost anyone in my life like that, I know of others who have, and I just can't stand by you. I'm really sorry about that, but our friendship is over. Could you say that? What do you say?
They'd be totally within their rights. I think if I were the other person, the person that was in jail now or whatever, I would feel so abandoned by that. But I mean, it's totally within their rights.
Yeah.
And you could do it for way less than that. Like, imagine that someone...
Did you just spit on the mic?
Yeah, a little bit. Sorry. Imagine
well, no, because you were wiping the microphone.
Imagine
that's mainly your... Well, I guess Bob and Rebecca use that mic, so...
Imagine that someone... actually, again, me. I'm just going to be the bad guy. I'm not drunk. I'm sober. I break in and I steal stuff. Like, I break into a place and I steal stuff. And I go to jail for theft. I could see someone writing me off. Be like, that's horrible. Like, whatever.
Well, meaning,
even though it's less, I didn't kill anyone.
Not one of your close friends, though.
Well, I mean, again, I would be devastated if I was written off. Although it's kind of a weird scenario because, like, why was I stealing stuff? But whatever. But I just looking at it from the outside looking in, I think people are within their rights to say, hey, look,
totally.
If you're going to be that way, then I guess we're not going to be friends.
Yeah, I think beyond a certain threshold, I guess including burglarizing places, because it's so premeditated.
Yeah.
You know, I think the perpetrator doesn't have any moral high ground to say, how dare you reject me for such a small reason? You know what I mean?
Right.
Because by taking those actions, as a perpetrator, you should know it's not hard to imagine that you're putting everyone around you in a very difficult spot because of what you're doing, you know?
And the thing with the drunk driving is, I guess I'm starting to think, well, part of it is the culture doesn't help because it's a culture of drinking, right? Now, I think there's been so much messaging now and so many options with Uber and all stuff that it is getting harder and harder to say, well, they were drunk.
Right. 30, 40 years ago, it was totally the norm.
Yeah.
It was understood you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
But it was rampant. You know,
I remember my
driving.
dad driving us home completely drunk one time in Bogota. And it was so scary. I was scared for my life because he was swerving all over the place. And I was like, and it was like 2 a.m. in the morning. And I'm like, Now, luckily it was back then and not. But anyways, that wasn't seen as like a monstrous thing, even though it is a monstrous thing. But back then it's like that happened all the time.
Right. Yeah.
Sucks.
Right. Yeah. People would even joke about it. One for the road.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Pretty awful. I just think that we have this black and white thinking when it comes to quote unquote criminals.
Yeah.
That the criminals are over there and they go in prison and they're bad people. And then there's all of us.
Yes.
Instead of recognizing the real story, because you don't hear the stories because no one's posting about it on Facebook, that a lot of people, you and I and everyone we know, everyone they know, if we all really knew what everyone was doing, there are a lot of things that would be considered cancelable or something. You know, not to say it's okay, and we should definitely try to stop it. I'm not saying we should just be complacent like it's normal. But my point is that this notion, this dichotomy or this black and white between the criminal and the good people, when someone does something that crosses the line into criminality and immoral behavior like driving drunk, then as a black and white society, we're just like, well, then they're dead to us.
That's over. Yeah.
And if you don't consider that person dead to you, then you're on the other side of the line.
And you haven't even considered where the line is. Let's say there was no alcohol involved. The person is driving. They're trying to get something out of their glove compartment. They're not even looking at their phone. They're literally just like, they might even have a bloody nose. Trying to get something out of the
or a bee is bothering them.
And they run, they kill someone.
Yeah.
Is that where the line is?
Yeah.
Hopefully not.
Yeah.
But they did kill someone.
Right.
Should you have been not paying attention to the road? No, you should have been. But like, and so what I'm saying is, life is not. It's anything but black and white, right?
Right.
So in this case, the ambivalent feelings are the feature.
Yeah, and also when you talk to a lot of family members of victims, the surviving family members, they often will talk about forgiveness and goodwill to the perpetrators.
Yeah.
So the people that have the most moral high ground to make a judgment about these things are often some of the most forgiving people, right? They're just like, there's a long time I was very angry at that person, and I have dealt with it, and now I have a perspective that, sort of like with you and your sexual abuse perpetrator, the girl who raped you when you were a kid. You have a very similar, you could be angry, and yet you have a sympathetic position about her.
Totally.
Just like, I'm pretty sure she must have been abused herself. She's 12. That's not very old. What she did was horrible and damaged me, and it wasn't good. And I just feel sorry for her. Actually, I feel like there was something wrong with her.
Unless she was like a complete psychopath, but I don't think she was, and whatever.
Yeah. And so that's a similar kind of situation where you are allowed to do that. Society will let you do that. But imagine if her friend were to have a sympathetic view of that 12-year, wherever that 12-year-old, wherever that 43-year-old is right now, or 53, wherever that 53-year-old person is right now, and her friend knows about what she did to you, and that friend of the girl who raped you was, had a complicated feeling. It was like, you did that when you were a kid, and your perpetrator is just like, I did. I was pretty screwed up back then. It's really horrible. Do we cancel the friend of your perpetrator?
Yes, cancel everyone.
You know what I mean? That's essentially, and that's in my book.
I think we should cancel anyone that they ever talked to, whether they knew what happened or not, because they should have known. Silence, not knowing is worse.
Yeah. Silence is violence, Bruno.
Ignorance is aggression.
All right, let's take a break. What do you say?
Let's do it.
Middle tier patron Jocelyn G, good old Jocelyn G, she says, if a time machine brought the Beatles to the present day and you had to choose a contemporary artist or group for them to perform with, which would you choose and why?
Oh, yes. Absolutely 100% Blur, because not only are the Blur, Damon Albarn, all those guys are huge Beatles fans.
Some of those don't know, the lead singer of Blur is the lead singer of the Gorillaz.
Oh, yes, the Gorillaz. Not only are they huge Beatles fans, I also love their music. So that alone, I just want to give them that present. But it would also drive a stake into Oasis.
Yeah.
They would. Can you imagine how upset Oasis would be?
Yeah, for those who don't know, because you're too young, there was either an actual rivalry or a fake rivalry between Blur and Oasis. Oasis was a much more popular band, but Blur was an actual music. Well, Blur was a better band. I thought Oasis's
have some good songs.
Hit
some
songs were fine. They were perfectly passable for top 40.
At least two, if not three things. One, I think it's a great matchup, actually. They'll do great music together.
And both bands were compared to the Beatles all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
And to be fair, there were a couple very Beatle-y Oasis songs. But I just want, and I do love those songs, but I think that it would be great to see the chagrin.
Yeah, those Oasis songs that are Beatle-y have melodies that are reminiscent of the 60s and perhaps the Beatles, kind of, but the instrumentation is so boring and bland. I mean, the guitars are just playing chords.
Yeah.
John and George and Paul never did that. They never just like chord. You know what I mean? For me, that's a good pick, Blur, but I would go with Dr. Dog. Do you know the band Dr. Dog?
I think Paul has told me about Dr. Dog.
I love Dr. Dog. Listen to them now. They are very much like the Beatles. I don't know if they are fans of the Beatles, but they seem like they are. And I've seen them live, and they have multiple...
And when I say Paul, I don't mean Paul McCartney. I mean Paul, our ex-drummer, my ex-drummer.
Jocelyn G has another question. Can you explain what attachment the Jedi deny? Does attachment theory apply to the Jedi? So in Star Wars, Berto, what do they mean by denying attachments?
Okay, so...
Or what are the rules for Jedis regarding marrying and attachments?
Right. Well, okay, but are we going by episode 1 through 3 garbage?
I mean,
because I think
4 through 6.
You get enough in 4 through 6, but fine. I think that the general idea, very monkish in this way, you know, like Tibetan monk kind of situation. The whole goal of the Jedi is that, you know, getting in tune with the Force is not trivial. Yes, the Force is all around us, but you really got to work at it. Clearly, you got to go to Dagobah and run through the swamps with Yoda on your back. You got to really work hard at it. And part of it is you got to let go of all material things. You got to really like just feel the Force. So if you're like, oh, wait, I can't practice today. I got to get back to my family. My kid is sick. My wife needs something. My uncle is blah. My boss is blah, blah. All that stuff is going to distract you and take you away from the connection to the Force.
Yeah, that's...
Same thing with money and power and fame and all those things.
Yeah, right. I think that obviously it was what George Lucas was gearing it towards was Buddhist monks, or at least what he thought to be Buddhist monks.
Or a random samurai with no attachments.
Yeah. But even samurai had allegiances and this sort of thing. And for the Jedi, at least the way Yoda was describing it, was that don't go to the Cloud City to save your friends, because that's an attachment, and that will create risk because Vader could kill you, and you're our only hope.
They're serving this bigger cause, which is to bring balance to the Force.
Right.
So anything that gets in the way of that is bad.
Right. And you have to even get rid of desire. Yeah. You have to be free of emotion. You have to be, mindful and aware and above it all, sort of a thing. And in 1 through 3 in the movies, they say more specifically, you can't have romantic relationships. So it's hard to say. And, I'm sure if you get into the weeds, there's a lot of lore regarding exactly how this is adjudicated, because it seemed frowned upon that Anakin was with Padme, right? They had to keep it secret. But would he have been kicked out? I think that was implied, right? That he would be kicked out of the Jedi Order if it was known that he was married.
Here's the thing that is so inconsistent, is that apparently the Jedi powers are something that you can pass along genetically. Mm-hmm. And
don't even get me started.
And you can't do that if you can't have a relationship.
The fact that you can pass them along, it's just so dumb. Because of the Palpatine bullshit, and
but even, to be fair, even in episodes 4 or 5, like, why is Luke so powerful with the Force?
Yeah,
because his father was Darth Vader. It was Anakin.
Well, is that what they were saying? Because
you're so much like your father. The Force is strong. I don't know. I think there's an implication.
Yeah,
there's definitely an implication.
I did get that when I was watching it as a kid. I got the implication that if anyone wanted to, but very few people did, because of, you could make an argument that if anyone wants to become enlightened, for example, in the Buddhist way, anyone can avail themselves of that, but it's a pain in the ass because you have
Actually, no. I will agree with you that when I was a kid, I thought of it more like The Karate Kid, more like these kind of movies. You're right. It was basically like, I just have to work hard enough. Mm-hmm. In fact, that is so true because, as we've discussed before, the Force to us as children seemed like an attainable, real thing.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. It is a retcon that basically it's like this genetic gift.
Well, 1 through 3, it doesn't even suggest it's a genetic gift. It just says midi-chlorians because his mom, the Immaculate Conception mom, didn't have, or they didn't ask to, she wasn't Force sensitive. But by the time we get to episode 9, apparently it just runs in families. And I have to say, like,
but no, episode 1 through 3, I think it's pretty clear that, like, I think it's pretty clear that midichlorians are genetically transferred.
I don't think so. I could be wrong. Either way, by the time we get to episode 9, and by the way,
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm not remembering it.
I made a note to myself to take down our episodes about Star Wars because I can't stand by what I have. Like, we probably made an episode about episode 8.
Yeah.
And I probably was talking very positively about it. And certainly episode 8 I did like at the time. But after episode 9, when I look back at episode 8, I don't like episode 8 anymore.
Well, that's probably true. I do remember railing against the whole casino section of episode,
totally. Me too. But I remember thinking
overall it was okay.
Yeah, I remember thinking there were some problems like the chasing.
Yeah, we have to retroactively disavow that.
But I remember walking out saying, well, it wasn't as good as episode 7, but it was good.
But I still like episode 7. I
don't even like episode 7 very much anymore because where it's headed.
No, because I still like The Matrix, and The Matrix is fine.
But The Matrix, the first Matrix movie,
self-contained.
It's so self-contained.
Yeah,
you don't need to care.
You didn't need the other ones. That's true.
Whereas in episode 7, when you see Rey on the screen and Finn, and you're just thinking, well, who cares about Finn? Finn doesn't do shit moving forward.
Yeah, but I still could see myself enjoying the first 5 seasons of Game of Thrones, like rewatching them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I watch a lot of analyses of Game of Thrones, which of course inevitably lead to the hated seasons. And I will reiterate something I said at the time when people were very upset about those latter seasons, that if you read the books, you understand the problem. Because
I know, but I didn't read the books.
I know, but when you read the books, there's so much that the TV show left out of the later books, even in the good seasons.
Yeah.
Because George Martin, the way that he writes, he keeps expanding on characters. He in the 5th book, he's adding new characters.
I totally get it, man.
And
totally get it.
And as I'm reading the books, I'm like, okay, if this is going to be a 7-book thing, I do not see how it's possible to wrap this up. And what's happening to George Martin right now is, as he
can't wrap it up.
He's writing the 6th book. It's not even the 7th book. He's writing the 6th book. It's apparently one of the biggest novels ever written in terms of pages.
Oh, God.
And he's so frustrated with it because there are so many things to keep track of and so many things to accomplish that he is telling the press now that he doesn't know if he'll ever finish even the 6th book. So when they started quickly wrapping shit up in the latter seasons of Game of Thrones, I was like, wow, that was quick. But in my head, I'm like, well, but what else are they supposed to do?
No, but there's levels. Listen,
they could have made it, and George Martin even said this, it's like, instead of making it 8 episodes in the final season, they should have made it 16 episodes. And they could have done that, and it would have been better. But
or even certain episodes like you didn't have to have the big winter's coming threat, scariest thing of all time for this world.
Yeah.
Basically show up and wrap up in one episode getting stabbed by a girl in one scene.
Totally. But as I'm watching the TV show prior to that season anyway, I knew that there were all sorts of nuances that were left out of the TV show. There's so many details there's whole characters that are not even focused on. Like there's another Aegon.
Game of Thrones aside, though, my point was simply that I think I'm okay with certain, maybe not Lost, but with certain shows or movies where I can still enjoy a part of it. Like, as an example, I still enjoy episodes 4, 5, and 6.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Even though I know what all the surrounding maelstrom is.
But to me, I think
you're saying that those are well encapsulated and they're self-sustaining.
Well, not only that, but because of all the other bad TV shows, like Ahsoka was pretty bad in my. I know some people like it. Me and my wife tried to watch it and literally fell asleep both times. And we watched the first few episodes, fell asleep at some point, and then a couple days later, we're like, okay, I guess we got to start over. So we started over the whole thing. Yeah. And then fell asleep again. And then like a week later, we're like, I think we should watch the show. And we both looked at each other like, ugh. It just felt like homework, you know?
Yeah.
got to it eventually and just found the writing. I mean, the acting is great.
Yeah.
The everything else is fine, but the writing, it was like, in my head, I'm like, there's so many other things they could have done with a TV show about Ahsoka other than what they did. It was just so blah. So to me, you know, other than Andor and Rogue One, I'm saying in order for me to enjoy Star Wars, I have to kind of
erase
everything.
Yeah.
And honestly, episodes 1 through 3 are looking pretty fucking
better and better.
pretty fucking good these days. And more hardcore Star Wars fans are starting to say that.
I will say this. I will agree with you.
Because at least they make sense, and there's a through line through three movies.
I will agree with you that there was nothing in episodes 1 through 3 as bad as episode 9.
Yeah.
And
you haven't even seen Obi-Wan yet.
I haven't, no.
I mean, that TV show is...
And the other thing about episodes 1 through 3 is, like, literally, the things you could do to fix them is actually a lot simpler than what you could do to fix episode 9.
Yeah.
Episode 9, you basically cannot fix.
Yeah.
But episodes 1 through 3, like, you know, extract Jar Jar or make him more like, you know, toned down from the start, right?
Sure.
Number 1. Number 2, basically make Anakin less annoying in all 3 movies, but certainly the first 2. Number 3, tone it down a little bit with the overly dramatic scenes. Even just those 3 things would make people like cringe less. And then, like you said, the story is still there. Is it the greatest story of all time? No. Is it the greatest dialogue? No.
Yeah.
But it's not like something you necessarily need to burn with fire.
Yeah.
So I'm actually unbelievably going to agree.
And I hate to say this, but like when I see Star Wars stuff, like 10 years ago, when I saw Star Wars stuff, if I saw someone wearing a Star Wars t-shirt or I was in a store or something, I got excited. Now, I actually have a negative reaction to Star Wars stuff.
Sucks. But that happened to me with the episodes. I mean, I still have the bad taste in my mouth. I don't know. I got to be careful with what I say about episodes 1 through 3 because there are little kids wearing pilot blast shield helmets practicing with live lightsabers. I mean, that's so bad.
Well, and then Darth Vader, no,
and Yoda Muppet show jumping around. I mean, come on now.
Yeah, there's some.
Oh wait,
but at least the story made sense.
So, but just to come back to what I was saying, I think what it is for me is that I can still enjoy episode 7 if, like you were saying, if I'm like, it's just a one shot. It's too bad they never made any more movies.
Absolutely, yeah. And then that's how we were at the time. When you and I walked out of that movie,
we were like, fine,
we were ecstatic. But
we thought it was going to go in this great direction.
I did, but I also didn't really care at the time because I figured it wouldn't be horrible.
Right.
And I also was so happy to see a proper directed and cinematic experience after 1 through 3, because you know the one thing you can say about episodes 1 through 3 is none of them are cinematic experiences.
No. And I'm getting chills thinking of her finding Luke at the end of episode 7 and the sadness of how they ended up playing that.
I know. It's so along those lines, you know, when I first saw episode 8 and there were people criticizing all that, I was like, well, I don't know, like the writer Rian Johnson decided to go a different way. But after seeing episode, because I watched a whole, you know, I've watched a lot of videos of people breaking down what happened, you know, what went wrong and behind the scenes kind of stuff. And this one guy was saying that Rian Johnson's movie, episode 8, wasn't as bad as some of the people were saying, but it did paint the next writer into a corner because of certain plot points that were hard to continue the story because Snoke is dead.
Yeah.
So you have, I guess, as the only 2 bad guys, you have Kylo Ren, but you also have Hux, who now is like what incels would call a beta, right?
Yeah.
He's just this joke of a character that's been thrown around by. Yeah. So really, you just have Kylo, and that's not epic, right? You need something that's epic for.
It could have been made epic.
It could have for sure. Yeah. But you could see how some writers would be like, oh, what do we do here, you know? Now, could you have done something to provide some epicness without going like 10,000 times overboard the way that J.J. Abrams did. I mean, not only is Palpatine back, but he also has like a bunch of Snokes in a jar, and he's got thousands upon thousands of Star Destroyers that are under the earth, and for some reason, out of the blue, every starship comes to their aid against a bunch of Star Destroyers.
One of my favorite YouTube creators, this gal Jenny, she makes all these really funny videos, kind of reviewing books and media, and a lot of it is Star Wars. And she also worked at Disneyland, so she's reviewed Star Wars Land and all these things. But in her review of Episode 9, she has this thing about like, and it's unbelievable that the Emperor can lift with his force powers a massive fleet of Star Destroyers out of the ground. I mean, imagine how powerful that is. But if you like pick him up, he's like, oh, no, put me down. And then you can just throw him down a hole.
Is that popular YouTuber Jenny?
Yeah.
So-and-so?
Yeah.
I literally just watched that video
one?
For like the 4th time.
Oh my God, it's so funny.
The title is something like,
oh no, Episode 9 is so bad. Oh no.
Yeah, well, it's something like, yeah, I guess I didn't like Episode 9.
I think that's what there's actually an oh no in there, like,
yeah,
because she was like, and she's always wearing like gear and stuff.
Yeah,
and I love her. She's
so I didn't know she worked at Disney, but yeah, she has a
now. She had worked at Disneyland.
Yeah, but she has a great delivery.
Oh yeah,
she's really funny.
I've seen her do so many different things. She's got this thing where she was analyzing. There is this church movement where they put on all these elaborate musicals with characters from Marvel and Avengers.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's
I
so
watched
funny.
that whole video. Yeah, she did her homework, and she analyzes this church remaking movies.
Yes.
And she watched all the YouTube videos and analyzed everything. Anyway,
anyways, but so I've got into this problem recently where I have these conversation ender interactions where someone, we're talking about whatever, and then someone's like, oh, have you watched Obi-Wan? I'm like, oh, no, not yet. And they'll be like, oh, it's great.
Ugh.
And I
mean, people can like what they like.
And I haven't seen it, but at the same time, I've heard from people I trust, so I don't want to go anywhere with it. I'm like, or even unrelated to Star Wars, like so many things with Elon Musk. Like I'll be talking, the other day I was at a friend's house playing games, and this older couple was there, and randomly we were talking about things, and the husband used to work at NASA, and then the conversation comes up. I was like, oh man, everything that Elon Musk is doing is just so amazing. And I was like, oh yeah, I mean, he is a really savvy investor in early companies. He is really good at making a lot of money from that. Like, well, yeah, but I mean, like, think about all the inventions he's made.
He didn't invent shit.
And he made the Tesla cars.
No,
and I was
he
like,
didn't.
well, he invested early in that company.
Yeah.
And then, and I was trying to be sociable and nice, but I'm like, oh my God, no, you're so far down the wrong rabbit hole here.
If he, this guy, this party just wasn't up to date on the news, that's one thing, and that's fine. But if he is actually aware of the news and still saying those things.
It's because like the common perception is that it's turned for sure, but the common perception is that he is a genius, inventor.
But you can't, that's different to me than have you seen Obi-Wan, because that's just someone that isn't just up to date, because that was the narrative.
It's an opinion that, well, yeah.
That was the narrative like a few years ago. In fact, I listened to a podcast, or I
guess what I mean is I don't have the heart to sit there and start spewing out facts that'll change their mind about Elon Musk.
No.
Similarly, who I wouldn't want to or have the heart to sit there and try to tear down something that someone just said is amazing that I think is probably not going to be good.
Yeah. Now, for those who liked Obi-Wan, it's great that you liked it. It did have its moments, and I was actually completely on board until about halfway through, even with some of the major changes they were making to the narrative, because this is a prequel to Episode 4, and they're doing things that I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense given what we know about episode 4. I mean, it's not completely impossible, but problems. And yet I was still fine with it. But then, so you haven't seen, I'll just give you one detail that in both Obi-Wan and in Ahsoka, there are multiple people who get stabbed through the chest with a lightsaber and live.
What?
Yes.
What?
Yes.
That doesn't make any sense. A, canon-wise, we have seen that is never a survivable thing.
Right.
Number one. Number two, actually, though, through the chest. Because I was pretty pissed to find out that somehow Darth Maul survived. That's pretty weird. But anyways, my point is that, that's weird.
Yeah. But at least with Darth Maul, he was cut,
through the bottom, which people survive those kinds of war wounds.
Right. His pelvis was removed. And
but a lightsaber would instantly incinerate all the primary organs.
And they don't do anything to justify the fact that these people come back. And you can just see the writing, right? Yeah. They're like, ooh, wouldn't it be epic if Darth Vader just like runs her through? Yeah, that'll be epic. But wait, we don't want to kill her. we need to keep her around because Kathleen Kennedy is telling us we have to do something with this character. So
all right. Well, she's back.
Instead of rewriting that scene, instead of Darth Vader runs her through, maybe he does something else to her, or but they
cuts off a hand. The point is in Empire, if Darth had stabbed Luke through the heart with the lightsaber, and in the next scene he's like being healed up by them. It's like, come on now.
but not even healed up. They just, the character just walks out, and it's like, the doctor fixed me up. So there are at least three. There's at least 3 moments, Berto. There could be more in just those 2 TV shows. Those 2 TV shows, I think, have a total of 16 episodes. In 16 episodes, you have at least 3 people run through the heart with a lightsaber, and in the very next, there's not a long. Imagine if in Andor, the TV show, someone got injured. There would be a long series of episodes where they recover. There'd be stakes. But and that's just one aspect to the writing of these shows.
But I don't understand. It's like, seriously, in my mind, becoming a writing in Hollywood seems like an insurmountable hill to climb, right? How are these people getting these jobs without the obvious basic knowledge of if you lower the stakes, no one cares?
It's the same in the Marvel universe. You have the money people influencing the script writing. You give someone the ability to write a movie like the first Iron Man, for example, or Infinity War, I'm guessing. Because if the current MCU were to write Infinity War, none of them would have died. Iron Man would definitely not die, because he is your bread and butter. But they back then had writers that wanted to write a good story, so they were given that freedom. Once the billions of dollars and Disney got involved, now you have a boardroom of idiots that are just like, okay, well, you have to do this with the script. And then as a writer, you probably throw your hands up and be like, I can't do this. And then they get some hack that is a yes man to the boardroom, and they'll do whatever you want. And those writers apparently are terrible, or they're made to be terrible by the pressures that they're under, So, along those lines, Berto, I didn't tell you this. I think I was telling someone else this, that I am so upset with the way Obi-Wan, the TV show, was written, that I asked ChatGPT to write a better script. And I know this is controversial because the big strike was about using AI to write scripts. But ChatGPT, it took a couple iterations. I had to be like, well, don't do that with the story because that doesn't make sense. Like after 5 or 6 prompts, it wrote a better outline for a script that was way better.
But you know why?
Because it pulls from actual
good stuff.
Well, it also pulls from canon.
Yeah.
Because I never thought about this, but the language models are
they're predicting what would come next from what it knows so far.
Right. From what it knows so far, it's like, well, what's the most likely thing or word to happen next? It also, in the AI and all of its neuronal connections, are the pulling from data regarding how to write a story, right? You have to have an arc, because ChatGPT clearly had that arc of like the hero's journey.
And that's my point, is that like it is formulaically, but the thing is, like, formulas are great when used properly.
Yes, there's a
it's
reason.
True in music,
why,
it's true in in anything.
Right.
Yeah.
The hero's journey. Just watch Joseph Campbell talk about it. This goes back centuries, millennia. That the importance of the hero's journey to us as humans, as a narrative structure, is clear. Going back to the ancient Greeks, ancient Chinese,
and there's a meta sense in which even just observing nature, you can't help but think that the more interesting thing is a hero's journey. Because if you're watching a river flow, right? Like a simple thing like a river flow. What's interesting about the river flowing is that there's all this kind of chaos that adds like this interesting variety, but it's got a beginning, middle, end, right? Like it's got a little storyline. And that's just watching a river flow. Everything in nature, the more interesting things that you watch in nature, and that's not even a human telling a story. So it's not random. I think what you're right about is that there are all those pressures for like, well, A, we got to get this out by such and such date. B, we got toy tie-ins, movie tie-ins. No, dude. Like you were saying, you got to keep that one alive. I don't care what you do. Like, I mean, I do care, but bring it back. Like,
and we have to set up the next sequel.
Yeah.
And dear listener, if you're still listening, God bless you, because this is just two old men shake fisted nerd shit. So I think what I'm saying that I was thinking to myself halfway last week is that I don't know if I'm a Star Wars fan anymore. Because when I look at Star Wars things, it brings me down. I will watch Andor season 2 and I will love it. But we're talking about a very narrow band of material of the overall canon Star Wars universe that I enjoy these days.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know. I see your point, but I can still be a fan of the OGs, and be like, yeah, if I...
but Palpatine comes back.
I don't care. I don't...
The entire...
Don't care.
Me too, but I can't help at this point in my life. I can't help but to think as I'm watching episode 6 and Luke prevails, I'm like,
that's useless. It's pointless.
It's pointless.
Doesn't matter.
He comes back. It doesn't. What you just did, Luke. Darth Vader died. That sucks. Or is that good? I don't know.
But now you know how I felt for all those years when I would pretend episodes 1 through 3 just didn't even exist.
Yeah. and who cares about the second Death Star? Because in 14 years, they build the Death Star that's the size of, it's literally a planet that can kill other planets in other solar systems. It can shoot multiple, in episode 7, this planet-sized Death Star shoots a number of other planets at the same time.
Yeah. So the thing you saved the world from, it was bad enough that episode 6 again had a Death Star, but you still haven't saved the planet. In fact, it's only going to get worse. You haven't saved the universe. It's going to get way worse than this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, worse, and nothing changes. Palpatine's still around. The First Order is basically the Empire.
A metaphor for the problem here is, I saw this Reddit thread where someone was asking, or Quora maybe it was, someone was like, why does Obi-Wan not remember owning droids,
Yeah.
And someone, tries to make it all make sense. They're like, well, no, technically, Obi-Wan says, I don't remember owning a droid. And technically, he never owned the droids.
I think that's the same.
Blah, blah, blah. And then someone else is like, no. The real reason is that when that movie was made, no one had thought through any of this other bullshit.
Right.
And it's all retconned.
Yeah. Those kinds of issues are kind of insignificant compared to Palpatine coming back.
But it did, yes, you're right, but it did bother me.
Yeah,
that there was no care to that.
Having C-3PO and R2 in episode 1 through 3 owned by Anakin is... one of the Lucas did it as well, but the other writers do it 1,000 times
and then
worse.
He built C-3PO. He built C-3PO. Come on. That was clearly a random protocol droid that got caught. In fact, that's what's adorable about it, is that he got caught in a random crossfire with the only droid that actually mattered, which was R2-D2.
Yeah. Yeah, because people, I don't know, a certain section of people that I am not in, they want everything to be connected.
Yeah.
They want everything to have a through line. So R2 can't just be a random droid. He has to have come from somewhere and he's going somewhere. And you know, like, and Rey can't just be a random person. She has to be connected somehow.
I mean, if like they wanted to throw, imagine how cool it would have been in episode 2 or maybe 3, that as they're doing what the good script would have done, somewhere you see in the distance as an Easter egg, a little assembly line, and they're putting together our 2 units. And one of them looks...
Or not.
No, but listen to me. If you did that, I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
You know?
But you don't even need to do that.
What I'm not okay with is in episode 1, R2 is fully there, and they go like, oh, we shall remember this droid. What's this droid's name? Oh, let me see. Oh, it's R2-D2.
Yeah. I mean, episode 4, it starts off with 2 random droids. You see other droids, by the way, and the camera focuses in on these 2 random droids. We are supposed to believe, and it works much better as a story, if these are just 2 random droids who probably haven't even seen a lot of war up until this point. Right. They're just kind of like randomly there.
The sense I got, it was
Leia
that
comes across this R2 unit, just a random R2 unit, and the story begins.
Yeah, because it's the hero's journey of little R2, right? Like I mean, I got the sense, maybe not as a kid, but in rewatching, I was like, obviously you wouldn't have, how do you say this? You didn't have 20 R2 units running around. So this was the designated R2 unit for that ship. Great. So Princess Leia is like, oh, where's the R2? I need to hide. Great. And of course she doesn't go to the C-3PO unit because that's not what a C-3PO unit would be used for. R2 is a highly specialized kind of little thing that can store information. So that's what I'm going to go to. That's the end of it. C-3PO barely knows Princess Leia. He knows that there's, oh, the princess is here. That's it. C-3PO is a nobody, but he's a protocol droid. That's it. And it's beautiful that way.
And he, you know, and apparently these 2 droids have a bit of a friendship. And so C-3PO...
but even that, it's like, they just happen to be assigned to the same ship.
But there was an implication early as they are getting into the escape pod that C-3PO has that kind of relationship with R2, just like, well, if you're going, then I'm going, kind of a thing.
Right. Although I get the sense, I still would see it as like, they've just been assigned to the ship, so they've kind of gotten to know each other.
Sure.
But
they're not like old friends.
R2 is able to move away from C-3PO on Tatooine when C-3PO doesn't want to go that way.
Yeah.
C-3PO is willing to abandon R2 initially.
Yeah.
They become closer as time goes by.
Yeah. Instead, what we are now watching when we watch episode 4 is, oh, it's Darth Vader's, that's the robot he made.
But don't worry, C-3PO's memories get wiped.
In fact, not only is that the robot he made, but he because you know, you haven't watched the cartoons.
No.
The amount of adventures that Obi-Wan and Anakin and R2 and C-3PO and Ahsoka,
oh my God,
they're the 5.
Yeah.
They are the 5 that travel across the galaxy for several years on hundreds of missions together. And then when a short, I don't know, 18 years later, Obi-Wan sees R2-D2, one of his dearest friends.
That's true. It's not centuries.
No. Luke was born at the end of episode 3.
I know.
And I think he's somewhere
18,
around something like that. Obi-Wan,
if that, he might be 17.
Obi-Wan comes over the hill. I mean, at the very least, he would wonder, is that R2-D2? You know, because you know,
dude, come on.
You and I met,
and he's certainly never indicated knowing C-3PO at all.
Yeah,
at all.
Yeah, yeah. But again, that pales in comparison to the bullshittery. Anyway, so Berto, we recorded all of this nonsense at the beginning of this, but I'm going to put it all at the end.
Yeah, that way people can
so that people can skip over. So that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because
you deserve it.